So here we go again. Going through the transformation. Better put up my zipper. Mostly. We've got a little bit of coffee. I did magnesium, two magnesium at 400 milligrams, 2 Tongkat Ali capsules, 2 vitamin C. And I'll probably need to go in and take a multivitamin, but I've got ample drops of the boron, and then I took in and woke up with some beef liver. And was pretty out of it today, thinking that it was like 4 a.m. when it was 7 or 8 or whatever it is right now. And we just start hobbling our way through. I just did a morning video. The waist is way down. The body fat's down. But then there's this mass on this side that's become undeniable over the years. That's just hanging down, and everything else is kind of a little fatty, right? A little normal looking, and then you have this droop. You got this big droop. So each time I go through this, each time I lose the body fat, it took me a significant amount of time before that left side would go down. And this is how I did it. This is the combative technique. And a lot of people, especially people who are on the sugar diet right now, would rail against, well, supposedly this Cole Robinson guy is a shot caller, even though he's really not educated in the nutrition or dietary world. People, the thing about social media is they want to relate with other people, right? And then they want to choose who they want, right? It's kind of like Nietzsche saying, when he's describing women, and he's not putting them down, but you see how to peek under their dress and finery, or even more so, there's a spider setting up roost in the other room. And me and my son have been watching David Attenborough on this HBO Max series. Guy's about to be 100 years old. And just showing these ecosystems and how nature will come to you. The ontology will come to you. And if you don't kill it, it will show its own comfort with you. Even though we've murdered and killed off so many life forms, there's an understanding of, look, I think your energy's okay, but I don't really have a choice. This is where my family's got to set up. I got to lay eggs. I got to be a spider. I have to create spider webs. This wall is available, right? And I tried to kind of reach my finger out to this spider, and though she was apprehensive, she didn't just scurry away and go, oh fuck, we set up a web the wrong place. There's a blending in of an ecosystem. So when people think that they've lost that, it's still there. It's still coming to you. Tell me what caused the bleaching and the scouring away of trying to wash away the stain. So you begin to see that it's the shame of biology placed on a woman, and it all has to do with her period. That's the only thing that she finds disgusting and hideous, especially when she becomes disgusting and hideous. That is overbloated, fat, hormonally imbalanced, untrained, unfit, and is left with these hidden hedonistic desires where she just becomes this disgusting Walmart walrus gorging on food, right? But then when you see the antithetical, there's very little difference between a younger man and a woman But there is a difference, and this is what women are quickly learning. And this is happening out in the mainstream. In military, in politic, there's a far different story. That her mouth and her shaming of other people because she's been taught the shame game, and that's her refraction back to the male for going, why can't you fucking get up and do this? Right? Sure, like the sex is over with. That was disgusting. That was our lower impulses, our lower desires, our hedonism. We had to make a pact with God, right? And create this God first, that it was okay for us to do this dastardly act, which we assert as nature, and there's nothing that disgusting in nature. If you watch the birth of a whale or an elephant, it's so expedient, it's so quick, it's so precise, it's so clean. But the act, the vile act, if you could get up and really turn the lights on and look at it all with human beings, it's disgusting. And now the human female has become the most disgusting creature on the planet. When you look at the process, when you look at the entire actionable deeds of what she does, how she thinks, how she drives, how she regards herself, what she demands, and what she can actually do to inflict power over other people, it's all love bombing. Like, picture this queen, this despotic ruler, and what she could actually do. You could take the weakest, most starved man and go, okay, now you guys go on a cage fight. He's gonna fuck her up. He's gonna fuck that fat old floppy bitch up. Just look at the reality of the situation. So when you look at a lion being raised by a female, and that is what he regards as his family, his kin, it's no different than if a man were to do it. There's the same type of regard, right? And so this is what Mother Circe is all about. This is how the love bombing and this false ideology, this false idea of power, right? And it's going to come crashing down, and it does. And in Islamic states and around the world, they don't regard women like that. And the Jews don't regard women like that, the Goy. And that's why these kids are being abused. The women don't see it. The ones who are pushing this egalitarian democratic bullshit. The egalitarianism is happening in the other room with that spider that we haven't bothered. And it's setting up, but it's going to try to show its dominance as well, right? When you let it go long enough, the whole bathroom will become spider webs. And you'll have to duck to get in there, right? So this might be something where Terence McKenna starts his own little scientific experiment, and that's kind of how my son Colin and I are, where you get to the point where you're like, this just doesn't make sense. That the government would like back this lying female and never force the female to even be questioned as to her assertions. And then even more so, you watch it and you're like, God, or the pervading powers or whatever's going on here, right, is also allowing her to do the misdeeds. There's no karma. There's no dharma. None of this is happening, right? So obviously I'm equating the female with the spider because that's exactly how the human female works. But she would be the first one to squish the spider or cut its legs off just to get it hastily out of the, trying to put a cup over it or whatever. And then she teaches the males to react this way, right? When it is highly efficacious. In fact, it is demanded by nature that we learn to work in a symbiotic union or state. And then you see some of the most assumingly brave people, like from mountain climbers, you know, free climbing with no ropes or anything like that, to downhill skaters, you know. You see a lot of females just jumping in there and doing it. And they think that they're like the end all, and then you'll see some guy do the same thing and just pass them up, right? There's this hubris that's involved with the feminine mind, and they're entirely different than the male. They require the entire household to support them, to champion and rally behind them. If they're going on, if you have an Olympic contender, you've got a fucking diva in your house that is demanding, like a black hole, demanding allegiance, demanding praise. It's not worth it in the end, right? She has to destroy the entire world because the universe reminds her of her weakness, even in her greatest feat. But men can achieve this and be torn down by their own mothers, right? It's okay to do. Just like yesterday, I was making the point that if you want to argue that point, look at if a bunch of witches set up post just like the Masons around the world, and in every fucking town there was a Masonic, instead of a Masonic order, there was like a Masonic connection to the Eastern Stars, to the witches, and you watched the things that they said out in public. This is what brought Johann von Marsteller, right? 1096, my direct lineage and family, up to, what was it, Ludwig. So, I mean, my relatives supposedly are General George Washington, Marsteller. There were two Marstellers that actually worked directly under George Washington. One was not a Mason, one was a Mason. And it's pretty crazy. The pallbearers at his funeral. There was even passed down through the Marsteller family line, the dual, that signified these dual pistols, passed down through generations, and then were again retrieved, sold, and then like retrieved or something. And there were only 4 male descendants that came over, even though I found only 1. But there are four male descendants that supposedly came over on the Palatine. But I looked through the records, but it was a book from like 1927 or something. And that ship traveled over and over again, taking thousands of people. They would just cram them in, and a lot of people would die on the way over from Germany. And we came here destitute, broke, owing actual money to the captains of the ships, being in debt, and having to then have people would meet you at the docks and pay off your debt note and say, you're an indentured servant for this many years. And supposedly all of the ledgers of all the Marstellers were in debt when they came to this country. And why did they leave? Why was the 100-year-long war going on? Witchcraft. That's the explanation. So when people go, oh, that's crazy, and it's like, what the fuck do you think psionics are? What do you think Jake Barber is talking about? What do you think this lady that Chris Bledsoe and Jake Barber, I was overcome by this immense passion and feeling and this love. You just got entered by a chick, came into your body, dumbass, and you were so ill-equipped to understand it, you didn't know you were under attack. And now She's taken over your whole life. And you're out searching for it because you're so stupid you can't psionically do those things. And when I've talked about it, I'm like, I had to develop those abilities. I had to see through them. There is a definite distinction between men and women. And women know it. They know the evil in them. If you just stop to listen, and they want to talk about it. They want to break free from the witch. They feel seduced by it. They feel the energy. They don't like it. They learn so much from if they had a good father or a good male teacher. But slowly they'll be turned. This voice will say, look at your own dad. He's looking at your butt. Look at your own dad. He's touching you here. Watch the signs, right? And they don't see that the mothers and the grandmothers are doing the same exact thing. It's just a lot sicker. So there's this whole recruitment into lesbianism because they're finding the love that they need. But really what people are looking for is purity. And they can only find that within themselves. And you have to be able to, you don't forgive yourself, because to forgive yourself is to acknowledge things that happened before and they were done to you. You live in a satanic playground. You live in Mother Circe's hell prison. And you're keeping yourself in prison. And this is why people left their home countries and why these wars started up, because there was this hearkening back to this psionic aspect. And that's exactly like, this isn't just an integral part of it and it's interesting. No, that is the feminine nature and the feminine mind. What is going on is the phenomenology, the noumenon, right? Of this big fucking science experiment of why we were set back, why there's such a blockage over Tartaria. Like, think about it for a second. If everything that Cliff High is talking about with Brett Weinstein, if these assertions are true, I just took my family lineage back to not 1096, but 96 AD. Fucking think about it. Why do you think it ends there? Why do you think it goes Latin at that point? Or does it go Greek? So my name literally means keeper of the horse stables. I've actually traced my family lineage back almost 1,000 years. Marstellus. And it was Johann von Marsteller. 1096, or was it 96? This is what everyone's talking about, that there's 1,000 years added and missing because, and you want to know who Johann von Marsteller was? He was a crusader. Oh, this shit gets interesting. So you have this connection, again, where these family lines, like it seems like, I don't know anyone, I've not even ever met anybody named Masteller, but on the East Coast, there's different derivatives. There's Maz Tiller, there's Maz Teller, right, with an O, but they're all derivatives of the same family line. And if somebody came and they're relatively illiterate, which isn't so much the case, but when you have a war going on for 100 years and people are fleeing, and so the Palatine was looking at setting up all over the place. I saw little blurbs about Jamaica and this and that, and like it was a financial, like everything in this book that I was reading last night from 1927 regarding the U.S. or the Palatine, right? This is before the 13 colony states were set up, right? So it was debt all the time. And my family's always been in debt. Always been in debt. Always had this huge debt prison placed over them. And even though my family proved themselves in all the wars, all the U.S. wars going back, there was numerous numbers of compared to the totality. The men fought, but did they fight because they had to, right? So here I'm looking at it and I'm seeing a lot of very talented people, but I'm seeing a family reduced. I'm seeing a lot of educated people, a lot of farmers, a lot of military service, and even people that reached up. But then when you look at George Washington, I mean, this was his best friend. His very best friend, who fought with him in battle. Like when you look at George Washington depicted as this godly person, you know, in illustration and in paintings, right? And then you see how he seemed to be following this sort of Masonic patronage. Well, my family, one of those family members was a Mason, and I'll bet that, you know, and then there were others that fought against the Masons, like John Quincy Adams fought against the Masons, but I've kind of sort of traced back to John Quincy Adams' Masteller. That I haven't seen in this dive, but I did years ago when I was diving into my lineage. And it put my lineage directly to a John Quincy Adams Masteller, quite potentially. This one's going off in a slightly different direction, but I think it's the same lineage. I think it just wasn't highlighted. But you have this forced perspective into the Masons. And why did the Masons even exist? It was this promise to get away from witches, to get away from the witchcraft. To say, look, you want to do witchcraft, don't do it in our house. You know, don't use your mind to spite me and poison me and sit over there with your evil eye, grandma, mom, right? Or even do things where you're poisoning somebody because you're so pissed off. You got this weird, evil generational shit going on here, where you got the witch living in your fucking house. It's just the truth, man. Nobody wants to hear this shit. Nobody wants to admit that the Salem witch trials and all that shit that really came way after. It's like, yeah, that wasn't even... So do you see what the Salem witch trials were all about? Do you see the connection there? And even more so, this is one that people don't talk about. They talk about the giants. But I'll tell you one thing that was documented that I found evidence of, and it's bizarre, and I'll have to look that up more. Think about a 7-foot tall, red-headed giant that has horns on its head. Well, those are the skeletal remains that were found in Pennsylvania. Right? So when I put my own family lineage in the store of how America came to be, looking at a family, not seeing it so patriotic, seeing who was sent here because they were in total debt to prep up in order for these 13 colony states to be established, right? In the first place, long before the U.S. even existed. So I found a Marsteller on the third voyage manifesto of the Palatine, the third voyage. And there was a Marsteller down there. And supposedly there was 3 others that had come, that had set up the entire, so we're all related, like, it wasn't that many. I didn't find any of the ledgers of the deceased. So there were those who were deceased and those who were married. But oftentimes, like, If they said there's this many children and this many adults, there was a 15-year-old boy and then there was a 15-year-old girl. The boy was regarded as a child and the girl was regarded as a woman. So it was docketed down as such, but you could see the reason for that, right? Is that there may have been a very clear reason why, right? It might have been more religious based. It might have been because she got her period and was noted to. It might have been because she was sort of like betrothed prior to. It might have been that she got married on the ship, right? Or it might have been that they were trying to conceal her from being fair game for anybody to, or she could have just been ugly as shit, which seems like a curse, but like for an intelligent woman that has athletic prowess and feels some sort of freedom, like that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the ugliest woman with the most ability, reaching the top tier and those top status and seeing how all the plebeians and the lower class behave, right? But the problem is that the queen at the top, she's not the most intelligent. She's not the most shrewd. She's bought by the banking institutions and the banking industry and can become equally as diabolical as any idiot. She's just, when they say shrewd, no, she's tactically using, she couldn't survive in military. Otherwise, we would see military strategists. You're not going to find one female military strategist. As much praise and claim as men have over their daughters, and it's like, would you put her in charge of the mapping system that's showing where you're going to strike? You wouldn't. And so that throws female logic out the window. Doesn't exist. She would get annihilated. Even the 220 IQ female would make the wrong strategic choice. That tells you a lot. Quite a bit. And as long as she has men to fight for her, as long as she can coerce men sexually and in many other ways with her amorousness and, right? So females, even though they appear to be the victim, they are not the victim. But there are many female victims, and that's something that the female is actually greatly partly responsible for, because she wants to conceal what she's ashamed of. And instead, like, why are you ashamed? This is how babies are made. This is the disgusting biological aspect of how we come to be. Like, let's look at the disgusting aspect of our nature, right? And be honest about it. So we're all living in that shame and disgust, and that's why we're creating AI, right? We are horrified by our nether parts and the impulses that we have. That what went along with this human intelligence and the human intellect was unlocking unfathomably dark, strange, Carl Jungian, Freudian areas of our minds that these men really just left a fucking mess. Because their assertions, their claims were entirely wrong and unfounded. In fact, they were seduced by this feminine agent to take up such ridiculous measures as the anima and the animus and the id, the ego, the superego. This is all just bullshit. The psychology behind it's bullshit. Like, that's one thing Tom Cruise was right about, but what he was wrong about is that big-nosed midget isn't talented, he isn't interesting, and he's just full of hubris. And at the end of the day, he ain't the guy who's surviving on the battlefield. He isn't the guy who can trace his lineage back to the beginning of this country. He's the guy who followed L. Ron Hubbard on his wayward ship into crazy town. And sadly, people are both trying to be wary of this sort of Antichrist figure, knowing that it was just a made-up story, but also knowing that what it harkened back to is that the Overman, the Ubermensch, the underground man from Dostoevsky's letters or posts from the underground is the same exact character. That you're going to have somebody who has been attacked psychically by their own mother, by their own, and these women are laughing and they're getting away with it, and there's laws that are protecting them, right? And they're wreaking havoc in people's lives, and there's no good reason, right? Men, perfectly good men, are brought down to their knees and nobody gives a shit. And these women are so twisted and bent and turned. Because what men discover is that it was all a grand illusion. That as much as they think they want a female, and as beautiful as they think she is a put-on. She is not a natural put-on. She is a very unnatural put-on of someone who can't see themselves. They feel beautiful. They feel dynamic. But 9.9 times out of 10, maybe even higher, they're not. Their entire modus operandi, their ego, is based on their libido, their tempo is based on a fallacy, a lie. And it's all pressed forth by their hormones just to procreate. And once they lose any luster that they may have had, the men are stuck with them. This bitching, disgusting, false representation, and the truth is disclosed. And then they become vile and heinous and do the most heinous acts. But they never do it in the open with any sort of morality and the morality is cast forth because of the female. This idea of morality, ethics, ethos. Now, I mean, there's a reason why Arthur Schopenhauer is regarded in such a way and not just dismissed. People like to diss him, but he took all of, debatably, he took all of, and when other people like Voltaire and David Hume and Spinoza, when they're talking about probity or principles, right, religiosity, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Proudhon, right, when these principles are talked about, it's like, look, we're going to have to figure out how to have a space where women can't break into, they can't come into. It's like then what they find is they have to create a faction, the Eastern Stars, because the women are coming in psychically and spying on them. They're taking the energy and coercing and seducing while they're sleeping with their husband or whatever to come up with the information, the synapses on the meeting. They're selling out their own, because that isn't their own. Womankind stick together, right? It's a fraternity. It's a fraternal organization. And it works antithetical to the fraternity, and it always does. It always does, and it always has. And this is the primary thing that men need to be raised with. And they wouldn't go out and try to inseminate some evil woman and destroy their entire lives, right? And that is the truth. They stay close to their mommy's hip while their mommy stole everything and lied just to cover her own ass. There's nothing unique about them. There's nothing beautiful. There's nothing dynamic. They're not like nature. It's not like these birds soaring in the sky and feeling the dynamics of themselves. You can literally reach out and touch them, And it's just this energy. They don't have that. they they portray that, they falsify that, right? So this is just the truth. People don't want to admit it. And so their response is, oh, you're gay. Homosexuality. You like this more. It's like, no, I don't like this blood-gorged, fat, bulbous, disgusting, stinky thing demanding more from me and wanting to eat more. Like if she isn't shown prudence, if she isn't dictated some sort of virtue and prudence, she isn't naturally attracted to it. This is what Mother Circe is about, but more so, this is what Lilith at the Red Sea is about. The second wife of Adam. And some might say that Lilith and Eve are the same person. The same person. And that the perspective was Adam being fractionated because he couldn't deal with the fact that this woman who seduced him and made all these promises to him under God, the Garden of Eden, the ignorant place, the beginning place, the place where life was rooted and then we found out. Right. But what we find is this is man and his recreation, his recreation. Garden of Eden was a sedentary place. Nobody was working. Nobody had to work. So if you take this sort of utopia and you say, you know, a little kid who's really smart would look around and go, Mommy or Daddy, why don't the trees all around us just have nuts and fruit? How come there's not a berry bush like at Uncle blah blah blah's house, just growing? Why is it that we can pick mushrooms up and with mushrooms? Is it because everyone's stupid and they eat those bad mushrooms? You know? How come they don't have a garden like in our back garden? Where we just grow some carrots and stuff and cabbage? Once you start putting that together, you realize quickly what this Garden of Eden was all about. It was a utopia, a place set aside where all the trees bore fruit and nuts, and nobody had to be killed. The animals had plenty to eat and drink, and natural fermentation happened where the birds and the beasts and the humans, they all went up to the plum trees, and when they were over-ripening with fruit and getting people drunk off their ass through nature. It's a normal, natural thing. Or hallucinogenics were discovered. But it didn't cause a rapid, huge deviation. It just opened the mind. It opened perspective. It allowed for a parallax view. Until that parallax view allowed for, wow, consciousness is on a sliding scale. If the woman can sneak into my dreams, right? When I have everything I need and there's no fear, I'm still being attacked. What's happening? And it's this female entity that comes through the wife that you're sleeping next to that you think you can trust. There's utter more dark dimensional scales going on with every single female through the feminine line. Right? And it's obviously not found exclusively in the XXXX chromosome aspect of this, because there are implications that a male component can come out of the 4X. And when you start to look at it, you're going, is this the whole agenda? Right? So, to say, oh, that's paranoid thinking, it's like, do you really know what we're derived from? Like the whole women are from Venus, men are from Mars kind of thing, where it's kind of like, well, you have Maldek, you have the asteroid belt, you have this, the angels came down, right? The male angels came down and invaded upon the earth women. And then you have this nice story told about this perfect Adam sleeping with this Eve, right? That's taken from Adam's rib, but then you go, it didn't work out. So he had to, what? Sleep with a different woman? And supposedly, I think Lilith came first. So it was like, look, neither of them worked out. They both turned on his ass. But the other one was like interested in Satan, the snake. You know, the snake depicted as a penis, right? It's a phallic symbol. It's a serpent. Like she went into coitus, union with the serpent. Fucking put it together. Be honest with yourself. People are still doing this to this day. The Ophites and the serpent worship. There's a whole different line of Canaanites, Tubal Cain. Right? There's a whole different mind state going on here that people don't want to admit. And this is why Jason Reza Giorgiani is refreshing, because he goes back to this time where he's looking at really what most people assert is this Khazarian mob or mafia, right? And it comes down to simple truths. When you think, oh, there's no way that the average everyday plebeian could understand this. There's no way that, right? And it's like, yeah, they could. Because it's based on the same context today as it always was. Right? These bitches are stealing your soul. They don't have enough of one. They don't have enough power. They don't have enough intellect. They just are stuck in a wanton state of desire. And all things that are hedonistic come from them and try to enter into the male mind. But they destroy the monad, or the pure state. And they're always trying to invade it and take over and leave the man in ruin. And this happens over and over again. And then people, do you think a soul that's corrupted lasts for long? Like you might go, why does evil last so long? And it's like, because there's new recruits required all the time, because this bitch at the center is sucking up and eating up souls, right? To the point where it's a question of digestion. There isn't an infinite number of people waiting on the other side, right? That's the whole point here, is that there is a limited few, and there's a constant need to recruit and to convince, a convincing aspect of, right, of supplication. And then there's a learning curve going on there, where through family lineage, family line, the men who can see it are silenced. The Salem witch trials, all the running from the witches, why my family came here, why 100 years of war in Pfungstadt, Germany left people destitute, but why a family line would be saved. And my family line, they went into blacksmithing on all sorts of other occupations, but they got their start by keeping the stables, keeping the horse stables. That was the tank. That was the engine. That was the car. That was the war horse. They didn't need 20, 50, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 different devices to do the same thing. Everything from a plow horse to a race horse to a war horse. That was horsepower, right? And when you took care of horses and you shoed horses, you were the one that was shoeing the other animals as well, right? The horse was the moniker, was at the pinnacle of it, right? So the keeper of the horse stables was taking care of the donkeys if there was donkeys on the farm, right? Plow horses, cattle, right? Understanding it. And it was the only place of refuge. It was the only place of refuge. It was the only place where you had the arena and you let them. It was almost like the laboratory, right? On the plantation, on the farm, right? Where it's like, or in this case, on the noble estates that were protected also, where long periods of time would go by even when there was war, and there you have it. You have this property set aside to keep the horses, to protect the horses. Because that was, without the horses, the arsenal couldn't advance forward. Without the horses, you couldn't, there would be no Paul Revere. You follow? There would be no depictions of George Washington riding on a horse. There would be no pale horse advisory. And in a way, like if you look at the 4 male Marstellers and the whole family coming from it, it's like, there you got 4 horse riders of the apocalypse riding on these white pale horses, right? That were coming from Germany, or from the purest perspective, from a Roman evangelical place, right? You could almost make an argument that early 1700s was the harbinger for our time. That 300 years just goes by really quickly, right? But yeah, I mean, for us, for my family, it isn't 250 years. It's 300 years. It's 300 years. Minimum dates 50 years prior to 1776. And those are the people that were used as indentured servants. My family came here destitute and poor and in debt. And that's why every generation after has been in debt. There's no family property. There's no lineage. There's no patronage. And all these long years of destitution, living in an area and having to migrate and move away, brought people from Pennsylvania through Ohio and the family lineage, through Iowa and other places, on into California, and they're still broke to this day. Still broke. It's not a state of mind, it's an energy. And like if anybody, and I'm the 13th generation, why do you think it says stellar mass 13? Right? It's to change it, change the order, mix it up. So my kids are the 14th generation of the Mastellers, or really the Marstellers, or you want to get more precise, von Marsteller. Or in Latin, Marstellus. And it also means marshal. So as ChatGPT is actually emailing all these places in Pfungstadt, Germany, trying to come up with a family line that goes back before 1096, that's the ending point. Like I took it back. I took it back to where Ralph Ellis is looking at when, right, if you take Brett Weinstein and what he's saying and you say there's 1,000 years added on for, so this gets into the Jewish control network, which really gets directly into Zionism, and it really gets into the crude terrorists, like I say, the plebeians, the the profane, as they refer to us, right? We're the profane. We're the ones. So, like, my family, like, think about it. Who do you think saved George Washington's ass? Why do you think those pallbearers, two of them, 30% of the pallbearers were marstellers? My family did the work and got fucked over. And now I'm a living testament of that. A living testament of that. The generation after generation, the debt of coming to this country that never got clarified. I'm the 13th generation, and there's something very pivotal and specific about the way I'm being treated and regarded. Very important. I am that one that Thomas Jefferson was talking about, but I've been fully aware and fully awake. Psychically attacked, spiritually attacked. Putting it all together. Coming up with my own method and my own mode. Fighting and railing against it, only to find that the outside world was always against me all along. I could have turned toward barbarism. There were times when I did, where I would try on the bully and go, fuck, I can punch some motherfuckers out. You know? I can throw a motherfucker across the room like my own father when he was attacking me and punching me, right? One of the most selfish drug addict people. The 12th in the line, right? The person who thought they were. And then when you go back, I can take it even further back, another 10 generations, and that would probably put us at 23 generations, like the fucking Habsburgs. Right? So things get really dynamic and interesting because the number 23 is extremely pivotal. And I know how to do this. I know how to do this. I know how to walk the long mile until I can't. And tame the beast. And work with what little I'm left with. Right? What little I'm left with. And reform it all. But what I know now, and what had to be proven, was everyone was against me. Everyone was always against me. Nobody was rooting for me. And it's a path that you walk alone. It's a soul path that you always walk alone, whether you want to admit it or not. And when people don't admit it, they live in an illusion, a shared paracosm. And that's what society has been based upon. But the 13 original colonies are all that are actually legitimate. Everything outside of that union is a complete and total fabrication and a lie. Territories had to be stolen. The feminine wiles of machination and deception were utilized in order to acquire the rest of these states, including Alaska. This is not America. This is a temporary occupation in California. This is one that was deceptively gotten and taken. Right? And this whole idea of a new Atlantis is just a bunch of bullshit. But technically, I can probably take my lineage all the way back to 1096, which is insane. And in a non-technical way, when you're starting to look at these literary experts and they're going, where the fuck is 1,000 years? Where's the fucking 1,000 years? It looks like it was just made up. So change that to 96 AD. And Ralph Ellis, his work, places Jesus or King Isis and his occupation at 76 AD. right? It was actually 50 years later. That's when he can match all the wars, everything that's chronicled. He's like, no, this is occurring over here. This rebel faction, this entire group. So when you begin to look at it, you scratch your head and you're going, holy crap. If in 1096, if 1096 was 96, and the whole Arthurian legends and all this are blending in, you know, Glenn Kimball, right, got erased. Kimball College. The only offspring he had was a female. She's seduced and she's just a witch and didn't carry on her father's legacy of really following through a lot of what he asserted. He was trying to fill in the blanks. Kind of reminds me of Jordan Maxwell a little bit, you know. And then it was like Jesus in the Americas, Jesus here, you know, Jesus in India. It's highly likely that Jesus didn't travel around all those places, but maybe he did. But it was King Isis and King Isis rebels. It gets into a whole nother area where if you erased 1,000 years, that entire 1,000-year occupation becomes much more significant, and so does the Bali religion of Hinduism, right? From this imperialistic rule at the time that was set up in the same time sequence, right? So why were these people flooding out of a certain area, right? What existed before that? Because what happens is you have to switch over to Latin, or was it more Greek? Right? Is Latin the deception? Right? So it is very interesting. And then you start to see why you can't take my family line back to 1096. Because if you were, you know, if somebody lived 50 years, you're taking it back to the middle of the century, smack dab. Like once you name that person, you've disclosed like that missing element, that missing person, that keeper of the stables. If that 1,000 years is true, that implanted 1,000 years, you're talking about the Marstellers being in the same area around the same time and being the noble horse keeper, right? And even more so, then that would only put the existence of the true Zoroaster, from what Jason Giorgiani says, within a 500-year period prior to. And that's what the Zoroaster was. He was raised as a noble horse breeder or a noble horse keeper, a master horse keeper. That's how he was raised. Until some witch, this is how the story goes, came from out of nowhere. And when he was becoming, going through puberty and becoming a young man, she went and talked the father into, you don't know how to raise this young man now. You've done a good job, but we're going to take young Sadi now. We'll treat him good. Teaching him abilities, teaching him how to express his psi abilities. Weird. Right? And then he was the Persian forerunner to, some say, Jesus Christ, that didn't come thousands of years after, because it makes more sense, right? If he was saying, this person's coming, and coming soon, and then you put, like, if Sadi, the Zoroaster, came 500 years before Jesus Christ, if 1,000, and it was really King Isis, and 1,000 years is missing, don't you start seeing what I'm saying? It's like, you could easily say that maybe Sadi and Jesus Christ were either the same person or related to one another. Where the story gets real wishy-washy. So maybe Sadi realized himself as this enigma, as this enigmatic figure, right? Because when they talk about a lot of things like Saul and Paul and all this stuff, right? When you see all these names and so forth, when you see James written about, even to some extent, the gospel of Judas Iscariot, very obscure and trippy, right? To where you start to look at it and you're like, were these just different aspects of the same person? But then when you begin to see it and you're looking at the totality of it, like, yeah, am I saying that my family is from Jesus? I mean, I'm saying that there's a possibility there that there's some sort of relation or that this historical figure was there around the same time, right? And then even more so, what we consider nobility is bizarre as well. Because it was like hard-won, hard-fought nobility, and it wasn't pretty. People didn't have all this technology available to them, or did they? Did it exist? Yeah, so we'll have to cut this one short, but obviously this is the 15th day, I think, of being on carnivore. It does work. But because you're taking in ample amounts of fat, the body does try to hang on to it. It tries to hang on to its stores. And my body fat appears to be much higher in pictures because I can just grab right here, where I can grab half the amount on the other side. It's like really, but I can lose it, and I need to lose it permanently because there's a growth going on here. It even hurts at times. My left side of my chest hurts, and when I look back at pictures, didn't have that problem. This was a problem that advanced over the last 7-8 years. And this is the remedy for everything. Because the bicycle, though it's one of the most awesome exercise modalities and gets you fit, you can come up with some very similar results if you're doing squats regularly 3-4 times a week, right? And really burning and taking your lower body through that, working your lower body at least a few times a week through resistance training. And right now, body weight's just fine, right? 15, 20 reps, going into some single leg type squats and things like that. And then as the weight comes down and the stability is gained. So what I'm not doing is I'm not allowing for what I would in the past is, oh wow, I'm sore today, or I'm exhausted, I'm not gonna walk today. There's no adjustment time. It's like a radical jump into all day exercising where my body's finally realizing, like, fuck, no, we're not resting and pulling back. We're advancing into this even deeper, even though we're still sore, right? We're having to figure out a way to keep moving. And there's a challenge that's placed on you physically, mentally, spiritually, where once you have to rise up and meet that challenge within a certain given time frame, it's equated to work and survival. These survival mechanisms get switched on. And what typically happens is body fat goes down. Overall body weight goes down. It has to, because the body has to be able to sustain itself. So what I'm doing is in the next 2-3 days, when I place my order, it's going to be almost all beef. I don't have the money to get bacon this time around. Bacon's just too expensive. But that's like the best way. Bacon like makes you lose weight. It's got just the perfect amount of fat. It keeps you in ketosis. There's something about pork in the assimilation into your system. It's just the way it is. And so I started out today with coffee, butter, and cream, and beef liver, and then all the supplements. I got in the boron, I got in the magnesium, right? I got it all in. And then I have some eggs that I made yesterday in the refrigerator. Really nicely made eggs, where I only I didn't hard boil them, I soft boiled them 7 minutes. Then I instantly put them into cold water, and it was relatively easy to deshell them, until I ended up with these really delicious eggs that are still good. They've been kept in the refrigerator. I've gone through 120 eggs in the past 3-4, and I think that a big part of what happens, what I see here on this left side, is there's a big reaction to hormones, right? When I'm taking in higher quality beef, I don't have that same issue, especially when I'm cooking that beef in on the stove in olive oil. So I'll be eating about 4, maybe even 5. I'll probably get through like 3 weeks of eating 5 1/3 pound beef patties every single day with cheese on top and mustard and some pickles. I'm doing that like for 3 weeks straight. That's pretty much what I'm living off of right there. And also beef liver and eggs and sardines. So for 3 weeks, I'm eating sardines, beef liver, beef, and eggs. And I'm topping it with cheese. I'm getting the sliced cheese so I don't overdo it. I'm putting a slice of cheese on each patty. And that right there is how I'm going to be getting shredded here. And as things are going, when I see, like, my waist is kind of distended right now, but when I did the video this morning, I noticed, even though I'm looking at myself going, wow, I look like shit, when I block out this side, everything's getting lean. This area is deceptive. It's very deceptive. But what I'm doing is I'm increasing on TRX, I'm increasing all my exercises. Everything's getting tight, right? Everything's getting trained. I'm going through the trained process. So it's been about a month that I've been hitting the TRX, maybe even 5 weeks. And prior to that, I was slowly starting in, and I was like, there's no way I can do this. Like, I can't do the same exercises I did years past. Like, just last year and the year prior, I was just doing I'm doing pull-ups, but it needs to be in combinate, right? I'm doing body weight and jump squats, but I'm doing it in combinate, right? It can't be like the solo. And my knees and my body just are sick of lunges. Lunges are something I can work into, but it's not like a go-to for me until I get really fit and my body weight's down, and then my body starts to want to move to these movement patterns, stretch, right? I'm the kind of person who has to bring my body weight down first and then I'll go into the scorpion stretches and all those other things that really make a difference in my flexibility, but I have to be able to work with it. And I gained 50 fucking pounds overnight, right? Over fucking night. It was insane. So over the course of 2 or 3 months of just eating normal inflammatory sort of foods, and that's what's going on here, is this area is inflamed. So Durian Rider is anorexic. Do you realize that he does testosterone and he's having a hard time keeping on any body weight at all? And he's essentially got nothing going for him. So he's like flexing, trying to increase his channel, but he's falling apart. Don't you see the issue with the sugar diet? It does not fucking work. But short term, for contest type prep, I think it gets people thinking. So when you see all these people, they're doing some form of steroids. There's even this, like, it makes me chuckle, makes me laugh actually, where I'm going, like this Mark Smellybell, he was comparing TRT with doing steroids. It's like, you are doing steroids. You're doing the base of every steroid cycle. You can do a standalone, but if you're doing it correctly, you're going to build it all on testosterone. You're just talking about doing between 250 milligrams to 500 to 750 milligrams. That's TRT. You're talking about running a low-level testosterone standalone cycle, you dumbass. And there, it gets obscure, right? Because then it's like, well, what if you threw a little Anavar in there? Would you still call it a standalone steroid cycle? And most people would be like, oh, yeah, I would. I'd just say that helps out. What about if you did a little test suspension? Just to, peak up, just 3 times a week around your workouts. So test suspension goes right into your system. And it just acutely brings up your testosterone level. Like you're talking about, like it affects you over an hour, but then your body, to get your natural circadian rhythm down and your coming out of slow wave sleep cycle, this is all tied into your sleep cycles. That's why the cure to all this, or my uncle would still be alive, right? If he could have started training, if he opened that damn box and started using that TRX, but that's easier said than done. I mean, you see me, I went through years, rapidly aging, even recently. Right? As soon as you go back on that American diet, whatever reversal you see with the gray hairs, which I believe is entirely possible and necessitated. Why wouldn't it be? Once you're in control of that apoptosis and autophagy, and it's hard because your body, like the horse, right? Your body is a beast that craves, requires, needs to be. You have to tame the beast. There's no other way around it. And so most people are sitting on their ass, vindictively writing, from a feminized form, writing letters to themselves. And some of them become books, and then they dig in, and as their health declines and they rapidly age and they go to shit, instead of getting up and walking and going, can you do that while you walk? And the answer is no. You can't do it as effectively. So you're sacrificing something, aren't you? You're sacrificing your health. You're sacrificing your lineage, your patronage. Is it worth it? The best that you can do is to demand your health. And the only way to do that is to use it. When they say use it or lose it, most people misconstrue that and do not assimilate that into effort. If you stand for one thing, get your ass up and walk. Then when you can afford it, go buy a bike. Get whatever bike you can. Sometimes it'll be an expensive bike, sometimes it'll be a cheap bike. But these days you can go to Walmart and buy yourself a really nice bike for $150. Sometimes cheaper. And you get out there, like right nearby here, there's a bike trail a block or so away. Long block, few blocks, but there's a whole bike trail that goes on to Marina, comes back out. Like you can go easily 10 miles north It's kind of like northwest because it wraps around this Monterey Bay, and then 10 miles south, wrapping around southwest, kind of this horseshoe. And it's really like 10, yeah, it does wrap around right there. So it's like 10 miles north, and then you're going 10 miles southwest. And that's what I determined back in the day. If you can get used to riding 10 miles a day, or not 10 miles, 10 miles one way, 10 miles the other way. If you can get used to riding 20 miles a day, you can make some very critical changes in your life. You get the cadence going, you're riding, and you're not trying to move with a lot of speed. Like you're just getting into the cadence and you're getting into the physical aspect of challenging your body. What happens is you're doing ab exercises every time you pedal, every time you're going through. And you can even like kind of kick in toward, right? As opposed to away, where you're getting more hip flexor, right? People that are more bow-legged on a bike, they're not hitting that core. You can shrink your core up on those bikes. It's pretty cool what you can do. And I just limped my way onto a bike. There was a bike there, my back was out, I couldn't walk for months at a time. Everyone enjoyed rubbing my nose in suffering, torturing me. My wife cheated on me at the time. Had somebody move into the apartment. She was cheating on me. I couldn't move. My mother came in and talked about that and enjoyed it with like a fascinating look on her face. Always getting in my business. Always messing with me. Always ruining my life and sabotaging me. And I focused in on what I'm doing right now. The reality to the core, to the center, to the breath, to the truth, to the reality, that this is the only thing, the only thing that you are given responsibility for is to tame the beast, is to direct the force. And if you can do that, that force extends out to all that doesn't have principle. You can follow those base principles and you come back to purity, and you are under attack by the entire universe. And you will be exhausted, and that will make you even more susceptible to attack. The only thing that I've found that keeps the spiritual attacks at bay is keeping your internal iron levels up that you get from beef liver. And you have to take in an adequate amount of beef liver. And I can somewhat feel the attacks even coming on me now. So I didn't have quite enough beef liver. And when you meet that quotient, you'll be a different person. And for people who think you're crazy, they're just not interested in them. The entities are not interested in them. They got to them long ago. They weren't even a challenge, and they're being used against you. So that does it. That gives me the A. That beef liver that I just had just gave me a whole profile, from selenium to zinc and vitamin B's. Everything's in there. crazy. But it brought my Heme iron levels up instantly, brought my copper up. Restores my liver health. And just a small amount of that every single day can save you, can save your life, can save your liver. And people don't realize it, but it's like the suffering. Like, the thing about suffering is you forget about it. Like when you think about slaves being mistreated in a chain gang, right? That's like the most atrocious depiction of how this sort of servitude, right? When you think about that, human physiology was the same. You had endorphins kicking in. You had testosterone pumping. You had plantation owners hornily looking at their male and female counterparts working all day and getting fit and living in joy, singing songs, right? As long as that sharecropper was making that money, he wanted to keep them happy. A happy pappy. So obviously, my family lineage wasn't used. It was used in the beginning and then just ditched to the side. And the memories of Germany were not any better. And this promise of a new life, of an ability, once you entered into debt, you never got out of it. Think about it. If you come into a new land, earning off your debt, you lose all that valuable youth and ability that brought you over on the ship. The ship just exhausted you. Many people just died. Not most, but several people died. There's a huge list of deceased people just coming over. And it was like this huge, burdenous trip. And they were bringing slaves from Germany. It wasn't the blacks that set it up. It wasn't the Hispanic people that set it up. It was the Germans that were first used and abused into indentured servitude to the captains of the ships. But the captains of the ships were paid off by the bankers. And really, if you look at it closely, that's when the banking system was diabolically active, and the people who set up post here early were setting up a financial burden on everyone. And the Swiss were involved in it. It was a big operation. My family was in the mix of it. And what did we end up with? Nothing. Nothing. Except for our health. Except for our bodies. Everything else is an illusion. Except for our skill sets. Except for the reality. Yeah, if I would have had 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C instead of 2,000, I would be running into the restroom right now. Not fun. So I cut back to a more practical amount today. And I'm going through a huge healing cycle right now. Because I'm running parallel to all this orthomolecular nutritional healing. I've been doing a very high level doses of vitamin C. I've been staying up above 6,000 milligrams daily for quite a while. Like I keep thinking, do I want to miss a day? And then I haven't missed one. I start to feel a little off. This has been noted and known that when you're taking in higher level vitamin C, you might even get sick if you drop off because your body suddenly realizes it doesn't have the vitamin C, and then it reacts appropriately. So you're warding off. It's working as an antioxidant. It's working on so many levels. And then what I'm doing here is obviously exercise is peaking out your cortisol levels. Even though I don't like the coffee, I know that the coffee is actually assisting and even bringing my cortisol levels up and forcing more vitamin C into my cells. So I think that there's a faster, more rapid uptake of vitamin C. And the vitamin C is better equipped at going to work. And then I am still driving in and out of gluconeogenesis. What I've found is I can feel my metabolism. Like I feel hot every time I eat now. I feel thermic. And that's a really good sign. I think this is going to be the most radical change that I've documented and witnessed in quite a while. Aside from using any sort of steroids or AAS in the past, right? Is that fundamentally this walking has been an asset, an attribute. And when I could have afforded it, I should have went and bought bikes. I just hated the area that I was living in. I hate California. I fucking hate this place. Like a lot of these shows that I post up, they're all in New York, Pennsylvania. Like there's something inside of me that just craves and misses that area. Like the promise of being able to go and own a property there. That is the American dream. That's the American promise. That finally, after 13 fucking generations of debt and debt notes, imagine what the farmers went through. Why would my grandfather have moved from Iowa to fucking Los Angeles and become a fucking used car salesman and die at 54 years old? Right? Heart attacks all around. My uncle died of a heart attack. My other grandfather died of a heart attack. But the crazy thing is the lion, like on the Hispanic side of my family, my grandfather coming from Mexico, he did not even look Mexican. He looked straight up Spanish. There's nothing like Mexican looking about him. And I can't even find any history on him. I can't find any history on him on my maternal side. And so what has been speculated is that he was raised with like 12, 15 other kids in a household, that was like not only just an orphanage, but a child trafficking home. Kids didn't stay there long. They were thrown into a hellish situation. She was a witch. She was a known witch in Santeria. And he was an interesting person. And he was actually right at Fort Ord, miles away from here. He was in the military. You can find him. I posted this up on my blog, but you can find him in the Black and Brown Brotherhood, where he organized this jazz coming together jazz set. He recorded professional jazz tracks. He's a saxophonist, clarinetist. He was a psychologist. He went back to school when he was like 50 years old and got a degree in psychology. Because he had spent time in the military, he was able to go in and get. And me, I didn't register for the draft because I hate the U.S. I hate every bit of ideology the U.S. stands for. And I think it actually comes from a strong military. And look what I do all day. Like, look what I do. I have the discipline, right, to go through this, but I have very poor genetics also. Like, when I transform my body, it's not like some person who just was born with like a Greek god looking, you know, better than a Greek god, right? No, for me, it's a flat back and a short legs, long torso, and the affinity to get fat too, and have small musculature, smaller musculature, and even more endomorphic type. Right. So for me to really transform my body and do what I've done in the past, it's like, holy shit. You showed that you can do it. It takes a tremendous amount of work every single time that I have done this. And this time around, like I've reached the same state that the Marstellers entering this country from Pfungstadt, Germany came in here with. In debt, short lifespan, not a lot of time, and having to work 10 times harder while everybody else is getting rich off you. That ain't gonna happen anymore. I demand release from this servitude. And I demand all that was taken now, in this generation, me now, at 50, almost 56 years old. So many of the people in my family died younger than me. I've already outlived them. And it ain't because human biology is rapidly advancing. It has to do with training, supplements, which I've done most of my life. See, I started training myself when I was just a teenager. I started taking supplements when I was just a teenager. I got seriously into bodybuilding as a teenager. So I've been carrying this around for 40 plus years on and off. There have been many times when there was huge gaps in my training, but I would go back. And that's probably the worst thing. That's how you end up having heart attacks and dying, right? Is that you completely do jack shit and then you go back in, right? But what I do is, and what I realized many years ago, what I realized almost 20 years ago, is that walking is the most fundamental thing that you can do. And that it can be the most painful thing that you'll ever do. And that most people who take shortcuts don't have the fortitude. The people getting the degrees that have to get a PhD or a doctorate or a master's degree, they're not the same people who are going to walk the long, hard mile. They want to achieve something where they get a credential or a certification, and you watch their health plummet. They just want to write some books and look important, but they don't really know jack shit. Like, for instance, go back 200 years and look at what people were studying in the form of human physiology, where somebody would become a doctor. It's not the same thing. In fact, what they learned and how they sucked in their cheeks and celebrated themselves, or a scientist, right? Probably the only thing debatably lost might be in the way of horticulture, right? But because there were, like when you look at the Voynich manuscripts and even spell books and things that led toward grimoire, right? There's a lot lost in the art of pharmacon, which is spanning back countless years, where the practical use of and the terrible experiments and the outcomes were documented because there were events, like somebody died after they ate that mushroom. Somebody tripped out and changed after eating that mushroom, you know? So you start, or this flower, or, you know, and things were cultivated. Like the fact that the cocaine mummy existed and is something that's being blocked out because it established a trade route from Egypt to the Americas 10,000 years ago. So if you can take it back 10,000 years, you better believe that around the younger Dryas, right, that this was occurring. And then when you get into the underground systems, right, that are also noted, that we've talked about here in depth, that attach the Grand Canyon to Death Valley and probably extend under the earth even more so into the inner earth. And many say you have to enter it through the South Pole regions to be able to get into the actual core. There's so much shit we don't know. But to be shit on and treated like shit, and to be attacked by spiritual forces, to be broke and destitute in a land that my forefathers literally fought for and gave their lives for before this shit even cracked. People want to talk shit like they're special and unique. My fucking family was laying it out, dying on battlefields for this shit country. Fuck this country. Fuck these motherfuckers, these lying banker motherfuckers. Fuck these people. I showed that I could crack the code and come up with a better system 12 years ago with EPL. That money is the root of all evil. And anybody who talks about money should be instantly executed because they have a machinating mind. They want to take advantage of other people. They're warranting death on other people in the future. Debt is death. What do you think Crime and Punishment was all about? Why that's so near and dear to me? It's been happening around the world for far too long. And we'll be doing this all day. I didn't train yesterday on TRX. I'd been working out for 5 days straight on TRX. My body was like, you're pretty good. You're done. that's enough stress to your whole body. We need some recovery. And then I forced it into this shit where I'm like, no, you're going to walk. You're getting your ass up and walking. So when I try to like get up and walk later or step around, I'm limping. Like when I get up in the morning, my feet ache every day. I'm limping. And I do go at a slower pace. I pull it back. Because like if I were to walk faster, I would become thermic and it would throw my appetite off. So you want to allow the oxidative stress to just come up really slowly. And then as I get lighter and leaner and more flexible, I'll be able to go into stretches. And then I'll even be able to do exercise. Like on my good days, I just want to go in there and train. Like the other day, 2 days ago, the reason I'm exhausted is because after my workout, my body was like, I want to do a set here. And then I would do like a set and really just like own that shit. And then it's like, I want to go in and do another set, later on in the day, just like to really solidify and get it in. And it's that type of drive that I'm looking for, right? And so if I did 5 hardcore days, that's the way I used to train in the past, where I might take 3 days off to allow all my connective tissue to repair. And without that, you're not going to be able to keep going. There's a very unrealistic expectation of how you put on muscle, how you naturally go through this metabolic process. More and more people are turning to steroids, and they're not understanding the long-term ramifications of it. They're just going from one cycle to the next. They're skipping PCT. So you got to understand that I did these PCT cycles properly. And the only reason I ended up like I have is because I did it to myself on purpose. I came out smooth. I came out with more thickness when I first did them in my early 40s. Like where it was like, I was able to be leaner and bigger. By a good, it may sound like slight, but it's like 5 or 10 pounds. And the thing when I was doing the big steroid cycles years ago, I was squatting with a lot of weight on my back, doing regular squats and then walking on top of that. So when I go into squats now, my body remembers that shit, right? I never got hugely into pull-ups. Last year I did. Last year it was pull-ups 3 times a week. I got up to doing 25, 30 pull-ups. Probably could have taken it beyond that. Where you get up to 25 or 30 and you're like, your body's going, why in the fuck are you pushing me so hard? And that's where you start weighting your pull-ups, right? But there is a break-off point where it's like you just keep getting lighter and your pull-ups going higher. It's kind of like when you do a pull down with 220, 250 pounds effectively, right? A lot of times you'll find you have a nice median weight of 180 pounds when you really got the muscle mass, right? And you're feeling it and you're able to just go through and articulate. And that's like a 180 pound guy doing, sets. And you might start out by fatiguing, just like you're carrying 50 pounds. You can do that with pull-ups. You can do that with pull-downs. Pull-downs are very effective because you can like reshape your body. There's a point where getting into the gym makes your workouts even more effective. But until then, you can put on a base. You can put on a platform. And there have been many times where I would go into these long lifting cycles where I'd put on really high quality body weight. I remember when I was in my 20s, about 25, 26 years old, 25 years old, I would go out to the gym and I did all compound exercises. I would do heavy back rows, heavy bench press, and heavy squats, all compound. And I remember being 210 pounds and just being solid. Like, I didn't have to do any arm exercises, and my arms were very big. I'm not sure, but I think I got up to like 18, close to 18-inch arms back then. Just naturally. And I was working full-time, had a job, had a family, had a gym membership, headed on out there and trained. Who knows where and what my amorous, disgusting ex-wife was doing. How she can live with herself, I have no idea. She was such a whore, such a lying whore. Always knew it. There are things that you just don't want to admit. So like Marcus Aurelius, it's like you can see what the guy went through. That Faustina who thought she was hot and sucked everyone off and fucked everybody. Yeah. Women can justify that. They can justify whoring themselves out. It's disgusting at the end of the day. It's just so, like, they're so disgusting. So fucking hideous. I'm gonna charge everything up. We'll talk to you soon.